Dear changemakers, and dear changemakers to be, first of all, I want to thank you all for being here today, because I really believe that it is the small things like attending this conference that can really keep the ball rolling and eventually create a big difference. I'm honored to talk to you today about the implementation of social cohesion and specifically about the youth participation in our communities. But what is this so-called youth participation exactly? And why do we care about it so much? I think the first question can be simply answered with youth participation is when youth is able to decide, co-decide and discuss on all matters that affect them, such as family matters, community matters, education, or legal or governmental policies. And to answer the second question, why do we care about youth participation? Why is it so important to us? I'd like to tell you about my story. My name is Fahima Elmi. I was born and raised in the Netherlands. And when I was 11, my mother, my little brother, my older sister, and we had to flee our home because of domestic violence and the fear of our lives. We went to a women's shelter, which is exactly the place where women go to when they aren't safe at home and they have no place elsewhere to go. And this time was very rough for a little girl like me. I had to flee and leave everything that I ever knew behind to go to this place where you're surrounded by women that had experienced very traumatic things. My mom, in this period of time, received great help. She had her counselor, she had supervisors, and the whole program surrounding processing her past and actually starting to work towards a future, which was great. But the downside here was that there was only help for the women in women's shelters. And when I looked around, I saw many young children that were not okay, mentally not okay, physically not okay, and these children were just overlooked. Even though they went through almost a similar situation as their mothers. This made me decide that I wanted to become active and I actually wanted to help these children. I spent almost 2 years in the women's shelter, and in the first few weeks I couldn't go to school because we didn't know yet if it was safe for me to go outside. So I had lots of free time to hang around and do stuff. So I decided that I wanted to become active, and even though I always tell people, yeah, change starts with a small thing, I actually started with a really big thing. When I was 11, I did an interview for the national TV, and it was during a time where an organization called the Forgotten Child Foundation did a campaign where they raised awareness for children living in shelters. And it was really scary for me because I never did something like that. But it was also really eye-opening because this was the first time that people actually cared about my opinion. And this made me so excited, and it also made me want to be active. So I really wanted to start raising my voice about issues that I had a lot of knowledge of because I had seen them or experienced them happening. Issues that fueled my anger or issues I was really passionate about. So I started to join 3 youth organizations called the Youth Taskforce, Youth Council for a Safe Future, and the Forgotten Child Foundation. And the topics that I wanted to raise my voice about were child abuse, children that had parents with psychological problems or an addiction, children that had parents that went through a very problematic divorce, but also topics such as refugee children and children that were bullied. And bear in mind that I was like 13 in this period of time and I had no confidence at all because no one ever cared about me or asked about my opinion. And I was surrounded by these adults, these older people that studied and had like diplomas and stuff like that. And I thought, oh, they were probably smarter than I am and they have way more knowledge. But I found out that an increasing age doesn't necessarily mean increasing knowledge. But that's a whole other story. So I started with small changes, and I did stuff as giving trainings and presentations to people that work with vulnerable children. I started talking to politicians, to the ombudsman and the mayors about what was happening with children, and I talked to them about the needs of children and how those needs were usually overlooked. I started joining youth groups, as I said, and I really saw a power in uniting young people. And lastly, I conducted some researches, or at least I helped with professional researches, and I did lots of writing so that whenever someone would doubt me or wanted to prove me wrong, I could really show them that I had knowledge about the things that I spoke of. But it was still a very big challenge for me that people didn't really take me serious. I remember that for the first conference I went to, I was in this youth panel, and one of the first questions that was asked to me was, why should I care about youth participation? I mean, it's important, but I don't think it's the most important thing. And I had to defend myself time and time again. And at some point, I started thinking, why should I do that? So I changed the question a little bit, and I started asking them, why do you think that youth participation is not important? These things affect our lives too. So why is our voice not as important as the voices of adults? And throughout the years, my experience really helped me. I grew more confident, and I started giving these speeches. And one really decisive moment was when I went to the House of Representatives and the Secretary of State, and I gave them a documentation with over 68,000 signatures of people around the Netherlands that agreed with me that there should be a program for young children that go to women's shelters. And eventually I initiated the program, and now there is a pretty professional program implemented in several women's shelters. And it's when a child goes into a women's shelter that from the first moment on, the child has their own supervisor, their own counselor, and that together with this person, the child forms a relationship, but also they start talking about the needs of the child, and they really take a progress to work towards the future of the child, which I think is really important. This program eventually led me to being nominated for the Children's Peace Prize as the very first Dutch person ever. I was 15 years old then. And yeah, that was pretty cool. It grew my own platform. And now I am 17 years old. And I learned that youth participation can be done in many, many ways. Youth participation is not only giving speeches or presentations. Some children, some youth only want to fill in a questionnaire or something like that. Not everyone wants to be really involved and do really a lot of things. Not everyone has the time for it, the energy, or not everyone has the passion for it. But still, it's important that these voices are heard. And this is especially with more disadvantaged children that's not easy to go to them. For example, the children living in shelters, the children, refugees children, for example. Sometimes it's really hard to connect with them, children with disabilities. And a lot of times, the policy decision makers tend to overlook them in a way because it's really hard for them to find them, and they don't really know how to kind of involve them in what they are doing. But I learned that it is our right of every child, of every young person, that our voice is heard. And I learned that every single voice is valuable, and every child, every young person has something to say. And it really angers me that a lot of policies are made about young people and not really with them. But I really believe that youth participation is very good. It's not only good for the development and confidence of the person self, but my confidence, for example, grew because people actually listen to me, and what I say is actually really important. But it's also a way to look at different perspectives and to talk with each other about solutions. And I think that youth participation is also the perfect way to create new leaders. You are actually developing or helping young children, young people to think in solutions and to actively engage in their communities. And even maybe actively engage internationally. What I think is really important is that people do not only ask for our opinions, but that they really actively try to engage us and reach out to us through Facebook posts, through commercials, through letters, and that they really show that our voice is valuable to them. And when decision makers want to work with children, that they do this in a safe and friendly environment. When we are given the chance to only show what we are capable of, and we can eventually grow, we can really become change makers and leaders. And this can eventually end up in loads of wanted and also loads of unwanted advice from us to help and create a better future. And I know that this is really difficult, and it's also a mindset shift, and it's difficult to find a good way in how to involve young people. And for every project, it's very different, but I think the most important or the best possible way to do this is when you ask the children, okay, how can I involve you? What would you like? I have a message for all the young people in the room. Everyone can be a change maker. I used to think that people like Malala, I really look up to her, and I used to think that she was someone that's so brave and so intelligent, and I could never see myself in her shoes. And then I started making small changes, and now I'm standing here in front of you. And it really shows that changes don't have to be really big, and you don't have to do lots of things. It can be like a small step, even inspiring your friend to actively engage in their community is already a big thing. And it is also okay to not always have the answers. I have had adults coming to me and asking me questions, and they expected me to have all the answers and all the solutions. But sometimes I don't have them too, but I'd like to tell you my ideas, and maybe we could find a solution together. But don't ever be afraid to show your voice and to talk, because it is valuable. And my message to all the decision makers and the people here in the room that work with young people, you have 2 days with inspiring, amazing young people here. Use this opportunity to learn, to listen, to ask questions, and to create solutions together. I want to thank you all for being here today, because I really believe that it is the small things like attending this conference that can keep the ball rolling and eventually create a big difference. Change starts here, and change starts right here in this room. Thank you.